What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the subscribers, and if you're new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So today I want to talk to you guys about how I plan my morning and evening stand locations. And so first of all, we need to sort of get into what is a morning and what is an evening stand. And that is when we're hunting morning movement and when we're hunting afternoon movement. So in the morning, deer are headed back to their bedding areas, and they are going to do that through the thickest part of cover that they can find. So we ideally in the morning want to be hunting pinch points or funnels. I did a video on how to identify these and create these on your own property. I'll link that at the end of this video so you can go check that out. But we want to be hunting these areas of thick cover that lead from wherever the deer went to all night back to their bedding areas. Now, unfortunately, this does mean that this morning movement is a little bit unpredictable because the deer could have ended up anywhere overnight, and we really don't know where they went to where they're coming back to, even if we do know where they're heading to those bedding areas. That's why we ideally need to be hunting these pinch points, so it really narrows down where they're going to be moving through to get back to those bedding areas, because of course it's now light out. They don't want to be walking through like a big open field, big open hardwoods, whatever. They're going to pick the thickest part of the woods to wind and weave their way back to those bedding areas once it got light out. Now, an afternoon stand, deer are headed to food sources. So if you have food plots, if you have a bait pile, maybe you have a feeder, maybe you just have ag in your area, once you know where these food sources are, you can guarantee that deer will be getting up out of their bedding areas about an hour or two before dark and will start heading towards those food sources. So by all means, you can hunt those food sources, but I have found it to be a lot more advantageous to hunt the line of movement towards those food sources, because, for example, the does are going to bed down really close to that food source, but those bucks could be hundreds of yards further into the woods, or if you're in like big wilderness, big up north woods setting, they could be as much as a half mile to a mile away, and it's just going to take them so long to get to that food source that you might not see them before it gets dark out. So it's a lot better to hunt where they're coming from, a line of movement where they're coming from, than it is to actually hunt the food source itself. So second, we want to make sure that we're properly hunting our wind and our thermals. So for a morning stand, you're going to want to be hunting higher in topography because your thermals will be going up in the morning. So if you're already sitting on top of like a knob or a hill or something, preferably in a stand, something elevated off of the ground, your scent is going to blow out and it's just going to kind of rise up over an area above a deer's head that would hypothetically be downwind of you, but it's not actually downwind of you because your thermals are lifting your scent up and over the top of them. So this is why you wouldn't want to hunt like down in a bottom in the morning, because all it's going to do is loft your scent right up a hill away from you, yes, down towards the direction that the wind is blowing, but it's going to loft it right up a hill, right where a deer could potentially be coming down to get to where you're at. So you definitely want to be thinking about those thermals as much as wind direction when you're hunting. And so then in the afternoon, you want to do the opposite. You want to sit down somewhere low, somewhere when the thermals are coming back down because the day is cooling off, that it kind of just buries your thermals down into a hole and lets them sit down there and just lets them deal down there. Now, yes, obviously a deer could walk through that area, so this is where wind direction does come into effect a lot more in the afternoon than it does in the morning, because like I said, you can get rid of your scent just with thermals in the morning when the day is warming up. But in the afternoon, you want to be really conscious of where that wind direction is blowing your scent. It will blow it that direction and the thermals will take it down. So make sure you're blowing it off into like a field, off into like open hardwoods, whatever, maybe your neighbor's property, wherever you're not expecting the deer to be coming from or being that time of day. And then while we're talking about wind and thermals, you also want to be watching the weather. Make sure you're watching for those cold fronts to be coming through. Deer are going to be moving a lot more during those fronts than they are the other times of year. Just also be aware that if, for example, that cold front does come through while you're hunting, that those morning thermals may not be going up anymore because it just cooled off. They may be coming down. So just be conscious of when the day is warming up and when it's cooling down isn't necessarily always in the morning and always in the afternoon. Just keep an eye on the weather for that. And so a funny way that I've actually found to know when these fronts are coming through or when the deer activity is at its highest is to just put a bird feeder outside your window at home. And if the birds are absolutely pounding those feeders right before a cold front comes through, that's also an excellent time to make sure you're in the woods, because the deer will be moving the same times that those birds are hitting those feeders. So it's just a good way to kind of get an eye on when these times are during these weather shifts. So third, I want to talk about how we're going to ingress and egress out of these stand locations. So the easiest way to explain this is you want to move where the deer aren't. So this is open hardwoods, open fields, property lines, wherever you don't want the deer to be or you're not expecting the deer to be. This is where you want to be moving through to get into these locations. So like I was talking about, that thick area of the woods that created a funnel or a vacuum in a specific area. Well, what created that thick area was open area adjacent to it. So you want to be coming in through that open area, not walking right through the thick area that those deer would be traveling in. And so when we're doing this in the morning, we want to also keep in mind which way our wind and thermals are blowing when we're walking in, not just when we're on stand. So in the morning, you want to be walking in high on a hill if you can, if you have that topography to play with, because those thermals are going to lift your scent up off the top of that hill, and you won't just be painting it downwind, because again, it's rising up above you. But if you were walking in on a low area, the wind and the thermals are just going to kind of blow it up that hill, and now you're painting everything that is on that hill. So just use topography to your advantage to take care of your wind in the morning. And then in the afternoon, when those thermals are coming down again, just like when you're sitting on stand, you need to be a lot more conscious of wind direction at that time. So just make sure that you're blowing your wind out into like an open hardwoods, an open field, into your neighbor's property, wherever you can get rid of that scent, to make sure you're not blowing it into like those food sources that you're planning on hunting, or those bedding areas that you're planning on these deer moving around. So just make sure you're blasting your scent away or up and out from these areas that you're trying to hunt in the morning and the afternoon. So fourth, I want to talk about how we can make this movement more predictable. Like I said, that morning movement can be really unpredictable, but things we can do to really sweeten up this movement is to put in things like mock scrapes and water holes. So when deer are moving through the woods, they have several options of trails to take from point A to point B to get where they're trying to go. But if you put a mock scrape and a water hole on one of those trails, they are way more likely than not to use that specific trail, because they're going to want to come through, just take a mouthful of water, bump that mock scrape on the way through, and you will be able to much more easily predict exactly which trail they're going to take through the woods. Now, the other way we can do this is to create funnels and create a vacuum into a specific area of the property. And so I've talked about this in greater detail in other videos, but just very quickly, what we can do is, like I said, create that thick area of the woods that they want to move through, but then we can sort of drop trees, either hinge cut them or just flush cut them, and drop them in a way that kind of steer the deer to the direction we want them to go, because they're not going to try to bust through a down tree. They're just going to bend and weave and wind their way through the part of the woods that we kind of created for them to go through. Now, obviously, the risk of this is that they don't go down your trail, and you do want to leave this open enough so that they don't feel like they're in a cattle chute here, because otherwise they're going to avoid it and just go around it if it's still thick off to the sides. But if it's open, like an open field or something, they're not going to walk out into an open field. They'll prefer to stay on that trail that you made them. So then number 5, I want to talk about when we should be sitting these stands in regards to what time of the season we should be sitting these. So on most properties, mine included, I have stands that are the best stands on the property, but they are the best stands throughout the entire season. I have other stands that are really good early season stands, and I have other stands that are really good late season stands, and that directly relates to the cover in those areas. So some of those early season stands have really good early season cover, and that is a great time to go sit those stands first, knowing that they're not going to be very desirable going later into the season, and that really gives those other stands a chance to soak. So what happens during the deer season is you get out and hunt, your neighbors get out and hunt, and all of those deer, especially those big mature bucks, get pushed to the most secluded part of the woods. So if you had pictures of him all summer leading up to the season and all of a sudden you don't see him anymore, that's because he had too much pressure put on him. It may also have been because he was in velvet and he's just moved where he can now be in thicker cover now that he's hard horned. But typically there's pressure put on the deer and then they slide into an area that's unpressured. That's why you want to leave your best stands on your property unpressured for later in the season, and then sit those early season stands, the ones that have good early season cover, early season food, whatever it is. Sit those ones. If you blow those ones out, ideally these aren't like in the back corner of your property that you're walking through your entire property to get to these. You don't want to do that for any stand location ever, by the way. But you want to hunt these early season stands first, then you can kind of transition into these other stands once it's like the perfect situation. You have the perfect wind, we're getting into that pre-rut activity, that rut activity. Maybe there's a cold front coming through and you just can't resist, you got to go get into that stand. That's fine. It's also like as the season goes on, if you do sit in one of those better stands, let it cool off for 2-3 weeks before you go sit in it again. And then always keep in mind too, when gun season happens, you're going to have the Orange Army come out there. You're going to have even more pressure coming out there. So just kind of give your property that sanctuary or that undisturbed area for the deer to congregate in, and then you can go get them after gun season's over, or set up in an area that you can see them from a distance during gun season and so on. Just try to hunt these stands smarter, not harder. The more you sit in them, the more disturbance you're putting in the woods, the worse off they're going to be. So just time it out perfectly. Save those late season stands for late season. Hunt those early season stands in the beginning. Save those perfect stands for the perfect time of year, be it a cold front, the rut, whatever. And then of course, keep your trail cameras out there. Use that trail camera history from years past to know which one of these stands has more activity in early season, in late season, which is your best stand on your property, which one's a good rut stand, so on and so forth, and just sort of adjust according to that. If you guys want to check out what trail cameras I use, I'll link them down in the description for you. You're going to want to be using something like a cell camera for those back secluded areas that you're trying to keep untouched, because you don't want to be going in there to check a camera either. And then lastly, number 6, we're going to talk about how to hunt the rut. So the rut is a great time of year. It's the best time to have those all-day sits. Well, I was just talking about morning and evening stands. Well, sometimes there are perfect situations where you have a stand that is a morning and an evening stand, and these stands are an excellent place to hunt during the rut because you're going to have all-day movement. Now, I do have a stand like this on my Northwest Wisconsin property. It is just an awesome combination of natural and man-made habitat that has just resulted in this being such a good area. Now, the topography comes together, all the regenerative growth has come together, that where we put food plots, where we put mock scrapes, where we put everything kind of all connects to make this perfect vacuum with funnels connecting into it, which makes it the perfect all-day sit stand. So it's a morning and an afternoon stand because the food plots are adjacent to it. It's an afternoon stand because it's in the thickest pinch point part of the woods. The deer move through that to get to their bedding areas, which are relating to that food source. And I'm going to put out a video after this one, about a week after this one, about how to identify where buck bedding is, but it's going to talk about doe bedding in the process. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that one. But we really do have this opportunity to have these all-day stand locations if we can put all of this together. You put a couple food plots, small food plots, compartmentalized food plots, hidden food plots in the thickest choke point of the woods. Put a mock scrape in there to connect kind of all of the movement through there. You will have your perfect stand location, and you want to save that for the absolute perfect time of year to hunt. So if you guys feel like you got some value out of this video, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one. Otherwise, go check out this one that I talked about earlier, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.